What's up guys, this is Heis, and welcome back to Twerp News. Well, better known as This Week in Rail Preservation News. I wasn't sure if there's going to be enough news to do this weekly, but you guys really rallied around that last episode and sent me a ton of cool new happenings. As always, the channel email is down in the description below, and let's just jump into it. Our first piece is not necessarily preservation news, but it's definitely something fun to touch on, and I'm open to including general rail news on this show as well. This piece of news is that Amtrak has reported record-breaking ridership and revenue, with ridership increasing to 34 million riders, which is a 5.1% increase over last year, and ticket revenue of $2.7 billion, which is a 10.4% increase over last year, with their total operating revenue at $3.9 billion, overall 9.1% up from last year. Amtrak's fiscal calendar is slightly shifted from most of ours, which is why we're hearing about this now, but it's really cool to hear that our general passenger service is on the uprise. The fine folks out at the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society have been spending the last few weeks working on New York Central 3001, which is an extremely exciting project that I've mentioned in videos before. New York Central steam is unfortunately really rare, and the group behind the very successful 765, working to bring back a New York Central Mohawk back into operation, is such a cool endeavor. The group is working to move the locomotive to its new home, which for something as large and as old as it is, that it hasn't moved in as long as it has, it's always a big task. They've taken off the main rods, the side rods, and inspected the roller bearings on the axles, which thankfully were in pretty good shape. And then they started work on the air brake system. One neat thing is that during the inspections, it was found that some of the bearing brasses were stamped with the date of January 2nd, 1957, which means they were installed right before the end of 3001's service career, which bodes quite well for the restoration. FWRHS is planning on moving the 3001 home next year, and more information can be found on their website. And by the way, the sources for as much of what I can find are down in the description as always. Some people elected to send me just little snippets, and I'll do the best I can. Ohio's Age of Steam Roundhouse Museum announced the passing of Laura Jacobson on November 18th, 2025. Together with her husband, Jerry Joe Jacobson, they founded the Age of Steam Roundhouse Museum. Age of Steam is a spectacular facility to visit with many fantastic steam treasures inside that I greatly enjoyed visiting in 2023, and my heart goes out to the Jacobson family hearing about Laura's passing. The Railroad Museum of Long Island recently announced that they've gotten a 3-year extension on their contract with the Strasburg Railroad. They've been working with the Strasburg to get the Long Island Railroad number 39, one of 3 remaining G5 10-wheelers built in 1929 by the Pennsylvania Railroad back into service. Their contract was originally scheduled to end in 2027, but now has a new deadline of 2030. They were working to raise a total of $1.5 million to operate the locomotive and have passed more than $310,000 at this point. The point of the partnership with the Strasburg is more than just about the restoration. The locomotive will also operate at the Strasburg Railroad for the foreseeable future, with the Strasburg Railroad providing much of the funding for Long Island 39. The St. Louis Iron Mountain and Southern Railroad in Jackson, Missouri has acquired several historic freight cars, and as well, they put a new cab on the former Crab Orchard and Egyptian number 5, which has been under restoration for 25 years. The number 5 was one of the last steam locomotives in revenue service in the United States, retired in 1981, with the FRA recognizing her railroad as the last to utilize steam in common carrier revenue service in 1986. It's great to see such good work being done on a neat locomotive like this. In Ogden, Utah, ex-Rio Grande SW1200, number 133, has been preserved. It's being loaned to the Ogden Union Station for the next 2 years from the Promontory chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, and it's on display for viewing at Ogden's Union Station as of last week. In model railroading news, I know I decided to call this series Twerp, but honestly it's more of things that most modern people who like trains are interested in that has news. Well, at least the train stuff. I'm not going to have any discussion of the Edmund Fitzgerald here, despite how good Mike Brady's video was about it. In model train news, Atlas has acquired Micro Trains, and it will be interesting to see moving forward what small-scale model offerings they're going to continue to offer from that brand and maybe where it goes in the future. Down under! At the National Railway Museum in Port Adelaide, the 703, a 2,000 horsepower Alco-made box cab, is going through testing. The plan is to operate the 703 for heritage train rides and to serve as a switching locomotive for the museum. Special thanks to William Adams for submitting this news and to Discord user VT29 for the photos and videos. Several of you have reached out in the comments about international rail news, and I'm absolutely open to showcasing anything and everything here. I'm just a little bit less plugged in the news streams from all these different places, so submissions like this are super helpful. Again, please send things to the channel email, which is in the description, and I'll do my best to cover them. Back stateside, the Pacific Southwest Railroad Museum in Camp, California, are starting to cosmetically restore MNRR number 3 in La Mesa, California, by the depot. Out at the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, the Frisco 200 has been restored and returned to service. It was the Frisco's very first diesel locomotive built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works as one of their VO 1000 classes, but ultimately got rebuilt by EMD with 567 prime mover. It marks the newest locomotive to operate for the TVRM, but it's their oldest diesel in the fleet, being built in 1941. Several of my friends are fond of calling this one the Baldwin Jeep, or BEEP for short. Across the US, everyone's getting ready for America 250, 250 years of the United States as a country next year. Many railroads have been painting up locomotives specifically to celebrate this, with 2 being unveiled this week: the Minnesota Commercial Railway's number 76 and the Reading and Northern's 1776. The Mid-Continent Railway Museum received a big donation: Milwaukee Road number 02091, a fantastic caboose. Back again internationally, in Finland they've announced that they're going to re-gauge their entire rail network from 5-foot gauge to standard gauge, or 4 foot 8.5 inches. That's 1524 millimeters swapping to 1435 for most of the rest of you. That is 9,200 kilometers of track that need to be re-gauged, and it's a project that's going to take decades to complete, but it's going to align Finland with the rest of Europe more evenly. We have 2 more pieces of news in Australia. The Z199 new build project had an update with lots of good running gear work completed. The Z199 project has been undertaken by Glenn Smith, a man of Adelaide, Australia, reconstructing an Australian 440, which will mark the first new build steam locomotive in Australia since 1950s upon its completion. The other piece of news from Oz is that in Victoria, Steam Ranger Engine 520, Sir Malcolm Barclay Harvey, is ready for hydrostatic testing. The locomotive hasn't had water in its boiler since 1998. These locomotives are what many refer to as a knockoff Penzi T1 that is going to be spectacular to see back in traffic. Here at the Colorado Railroad Museum, the Denver and Rio Grande Western number 315 has arrived, and it started service during Polar Express. I've actually gotten to operate it for 2 different nights now, and there's a lot to say, and we'll talk about that more in its own video in the future. Last but not certainly least, out in Silvis, Illinois, the Railroading Heritage of Midwest America, or the RRHMA, has announced that they plan to reconstruct a roundhouse at the former site of the Rock Island Roundhouse at Silvis. In 2024, they received the turntable from Cicero, from the BNSF Railway, which is a 135-foot long turntable. Once it's in service, it's going to be the biggest preserved operating turntable in the USA, which is a key detail. Those of you who are plugged into U.S. rail preservation news will recall that the group at Silvis acquired and are restoring to operation Union Pacific 3985, the Challenger, and UP 5511, a fantastic 210-2. I cannot wait to see young valve gear in action, personally. Side note, if any of you at Silvis are watching, please let me know. I would love to come visit, chat, and show off what you guys are doing out there in a dedicated video. That's the news for this week. Wow. That was quite the list of things, wasn't it? I suppose some of this is catch up, what with the new format and me announcing that I'm going to do this. And we'll see how things shape up moving forward. Let me know if you'd liked the international and other news inclusions, and that's going to help me determine exactly what's right to say here. Also, it let me know how you like the level of detail. Folks provided so much detail in some cases. It was challenging for me to determine what to actually include in the video and what determined it was news, while keeping it brief and concise at the same time. I'd appreciate whatever feedback you have in the comments down below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch y'all next time.